Kane Archer is now a UCF Knight, but could this be the start of something good for Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Joining me as he does every week is my good friend Andrew Gluco from The Last Word on Sports. We're talking recruiting, and specifically we're talking about Kane Archer and what his commitment could mean for the UCF Knights, the domino effect, the starting of a pipeline, and how to build a winner. All those things we'll talk about today. But let's start with the domino effect. We're recording this after I've interviewed Mr. Kane Archer himself. I gotta say, Andrew, fantastic young man. It was one of the best interviews I've done. Great head on his shoulders. Not hard to see why Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton believe in this young man. I will note, now we have done many episodes on Mackenzie Milton as a recruiter. He noted Milton's influence in getting him to commit what they saw in him. And he said, hey, Mackenzie's my primary recruiter. He's the guy. He's one of the main reasons I am committing to UCF as a quarterback. Arkansas kid there. Look, Andrew, could this be the start of something good for Scott Frost if they can get Kane Archer in, develop him, make him into a star, and then show the world that UCF is where you want to be if you're a top-rated QB?
Absolutely. There's no better recruiting out there than players talking to players. They're not restricted by any rules or anything like that. So, we've seen it in many places. You've seen it in your line of work over the years. A player comes in, he's charismatic, he carries some influence, and he's bringing buddies with him.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that says that UCF cannot develop a pipeline. Look, Arkansas is part of the Southeast. Florida is part of the Southeast, even though it's not part of the South, it's the Southeast. There's no reason why players, will avoid why to come to a UCF. It's close enough that parents can come watch the games, on a occasional enough basis that it doesn't take, a cross-country trip to pull it off. And, one of the things that Mackenzie Milton brings to the table here is he is a UCF product. He knows the ins and outs of the school. He's not just an employee. He's a product of the system, of the school. And so he gives perspective that a regular coach who did not go to school at UCF brings to the table. And that, I think that influence is what's really going to help push the envelope for some of these players. Now, obviously, quarterback is the biggest position to take care of. You take care of quarterback, and a great quarterback can turn an okay receiver into a good receiver. That's right. A good receiver into a great receiver. So you do that. You focus on that, get that taken care of, and then you allow the player who has this great experience with a Mackenzie Milton, then start talking to other players and recruits that he knows, like, hey, Mackenzie Milton, this guy is legit. You want to be around this guy. He's the total package. He has experience with the school. He's put together. He knows how to win. He understands the school. He's got great character, which is another thing. Mackenzie Milton is an outstanding person character wise, and I think a lot of players can value that. As we talked about in the previous show, you would have to compensate a lot more for a sleazeball to be able to pull a player in. But if you've got a great personality, great character, good morals, and then it just kind of radiates off you, because that energy is contagious. It is contagious. It takes less effort for those coaches to be able to bring in players, because you want to be around winners. You want to be around good people. Makes you better, sets you up for the future. And every player is looking for something different. Some are looking for immediate playing time. Some are looking for building legacy. But there's others who just want to be around good people and set themselves up for the future. And I think, a player like Kane Archer, who has who's highly touted. It hasn't even hit his senior year yet, which, you follow the trajectory and it's supposed to keep going up. His junior numbers were just astronomically out of this world. His over 50 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I mean, that kind of speaks for himself. So you use that, you follow the trajectory, and then you use the influence that he has. He's excited. He's buying into this program. You let him, unleash the Kraken, and let a player like Kane go and talk to other players and kind of start to direct them. And then he's constantly talking to the coaches. Scott Frost, Mackenzie Milton, Steve Cooper, whoever. He's talking to coaches, and so then he can start like, hey, I've been talking to this guy. I've been talking to this guy. There's no rules that says players can't talk to other players. The restrictions are on coaches. So you can have players be able to send out feelers and not run aground to any rule violations. But by sending, context, it's no different than, a coworker doing an employee referral program at your job. You bring guys in and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but hey, you got a guy who's selling the program for you.
Yeah, I did put a clip out on Twitter about him talking about the solidness of his commitment. And he's said he's 200% committed. He wanted to commit back in February, actually. He had to go through some things, but he said, I'm not switching up, Mike. I'm in this. I'm not a guy that jumps and pulls my commitment. This is it. UCF is it for me. We thought through this decision as a family, and this is the right thing. Now, remember, he had an offer from his home state school of Arkansas and is deciding to forego that to travel to Orlando and spend the next 4 years of his life. I think this is significant. Now, you talked about the integrity and the character of Mackenzie Milton. He's not that. One of the things he noted during the interview was remembering Mackenzie Milton playing in 2017. That's fresh on his mind. I mean, he's old enough to remember. Look, I remember watching him that season and wanting to and seeing myself in that role, leading an undefeated team. And look, I mean, it was a very, very telling interview to see that Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton are not just recruiting talented players, but good people, as you said. And you talked about good people wanting to be around good people. I think that's what we have here in Kane Archer. But like I said, starting a pipeline is important, which means you cannot be consistently going to the portal for players. Andrew, we're going to talk about how UCF starts that pipeline right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. You can find the right talent. Fast and easy hiring is right at your fingertips, and it's cost-effective for growth. Look, visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Again, Upwork.com. Starting that pipeline is about high school recruiting. Now, we know the portal is about money. Flat out. If you want top players in the portal, you need money. Otherwise, you're just kind of picking the scraps of guys who are looking for a home but may not be able to find one because they overestimated their value in the portal and then got in the portal and got lost. We talk about the portal from a perspective of, oh, well, this guy wants this much, this guy wants that much, but nobody talks about the kids who go in and never come out, essentially get lost in the portal.
Just a lot of them.
It's a lot of them, right? Well, so this is why I feel building a program is still about high school recruiting. I love the flexibility the portal gives players, especially if you commit to a program, Andrew, and a coach lied to you and said that he had a plan and he didn't, or if that coach gets fired or there's some kind of material change that would necessitate you reevaluating your situation. I love that flexibility for players. However, if you want to build a program, you got to go to high school consistently. You got to get guys into your program. You got to develop them and you got to get them to stay. Now, that's where the money comes back in, getting them to stay, certainly. But especially for positions like offensive line. And in my book, QB, right? If you are in the portal looking for a savior at QB every year, eventually you're going to get Gust, like Gus did with KJ. Come on, man.
You're going to get Gus.
Oh, it's going to happen to you
that.
if you are continuously in the portal looking for a QB. And this is what I love about Kane Archer's commitment. It's a chance for us to see if these guys have what it takes to get a guy in, develop them, keep them in the program, get the next guy in, and then hand the baton off.
Well, you're looking at so obviously there's an apples to oranges thing here because high schoolers it's one thing. It's usually for most of them it's the start of it. It's development. Dollars are not necessarily going to be there outside of the very top echelon. The dollars are kind of a secondary thing for most of these players. They're looking for growth and opportunity. Portal. Everyone's in a portal for a reason. It could be playing time. It could be, like you said, an issue with the coaching staff. You were sold one thing, you were delivered something else. A lot of it is money. They're chasing the dollars, and UCF's been on the short end of that stick multiple times. So everyone in the portal is there for a reason. That's used for plugging in holes. Usually for experience or depth or something. That's for plugging holes. But you need, as you said, you need a solid high school development program to create sustained success. Look at what Mackenzie Milton did when he was here as a player. He opened the Hawaii pipeline. He was, he and Scott Frost met when Frost was still at Oregon. Wasn't offered there because Oregon was looking at higher echelon players, but he remembered him. Goes to UCF, immediately turns and offers him, brings him in, very under-recruited player. You look at him on the surface, Milton's not a big guy, so he doesn't check a lot of those boxes. But Scott Frost saw, character, saw tenacity, and saw things that he was looking for in a player. That opened the door for other players. Dylan Gabriel, Mokia Atamalala was another one that came in. He didn't stay, but he was another player that came in as a result of, and he was a 4-star wide receiver, as a result of that Hawaii pipeline that Mackenzie Milton started. There's no reason why Kane Archer can't start the same in Arkansas. It'd actually probably be a little bit easier to recruit just because it's closer. It's just, you can put more, it will take less resources to recruit the area versus, a Hawaiian pipeline that you basically have to fly from one end to the other to be able to do. So, you want to have those connections. Networking's everything. It's like, your job. I remember when I got my first job out of college, what got me in the door? Networking. It was connections, not what you know, it's who you know. You got to get your foot in the door and then the rest is all on you. Well, it's no different here. Networking. You're using a recruit like a Kane Archer who has, some clout and is able to start talking to other players. And then it just kind of spider webs from there. And then, and they tell their friends and they tell their friends and so on and so on. And you can create a working pipeline. It even can extend beyond just Arkansas. It can go into Georgia. It can go into Alabama, Mississippi. You're talking about the whole Southeast. A lot of these guys know each other. They've played with each other. Some have moved a little bit here and there, but there's still connections. And you can, I don't want to say exploit it because that makes it sound like a bad thing, but you can take advantage of it and utilize it to its highest value. But as you said, you've got to start somewhere. And this is the first big recruit, high school wise, out of the Scott Frost version 2.0 era in Kane Archer. So that's the guy you kind of want to coalesce around as far as saying, this is the type of guy we want to bring in. He's talented. He's got a good head on his shoulders. This is the kind of guy we want. And then others will take notice. And then, aside from Archer talking to others, players out there will say, hey, I want to be involved with that. I like where they're going. And eventually it'll open the door to other areas where they can start potentially building pipelines. Florida has so much talent. They can stay in state too. That's always been a challenge because you got Florida State, Miami is the establishment. You've been always fighting for second tier guys, but look at Sincere Edwards. They went after him hard in the last recruiting class in 2024. They had him as a commit. He flipped to Pitt. He was there for a year. He's transferred to UCF. And that was something that Gus Malzahn was able to do rather well, bringing guys back home after they had a short stint somewhere else. Like, okay, you had your fun. Let's come back home and get to work. They can continue to do that, but also open it up on the high school level. It's like, hey, you don't even have to do that. Look what we got over here in your backyard. We got something special going on here. And so they say this place. And it started with Scott Frost constantly referring to UCF as this place. And it became a kind of a punchline in the fan base where the term was constantly used. And it's, but the truth is this place, UCF, has unique things to offer that a Florida doesn't offer, that a Florida State doesn't. It's a very modern campus, very new. I mean, the school itself opened started in 1963. Its first set of classes came a little bit later, but so it's still very young. These buildings, some of them are still very new. So, you're looking at, are you interested in walking through 100-year buildings, or are you interested in something brand new that you are helping build off the ground?
Yeah, let me tell you, Kane did talk about forging his own legacy. And this is something we've talked about on this show, about UCF having an opportunity for kids to walk the road kind of less traveled and forge their own legacy at a school that maybe not everybody expected them to go to. I love when I hear from the kids that they move as a unit, as a family. Like, they sit down, they talk about it. They say, hey, what is the best trajectory here? He's got some other brothers in football as well, too. And so it's a family of athletes here. But certainly when you talk about starting that pipeline, it's about creating legacies as well, too. And if Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton can help guys create legacies, particularly at QB, I think you're going to see a lot of guys commit to UCF. But look, what does it take to build a winner? It's beyond the pipeline. What else is it going to take? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NBA playoffs is in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. If you watch the Timberwolves take down the Lakers, you know what I mean. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments? You can track those and help. The app helps you build trends. And, you can get a $200 bonus in bets and add excitement if your first $5 bet wins. New to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Again, head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Building a winner. I want to close the show talking about what it takes to build a winner. Obviously, recruiting is the bedrock. It is the lifeblood of college football. You've got to be able to get out and recruit. You talked about building that pipeline. And because you reside in the state of Florida, you are already in one of the most fertile recruiting grounds in the country. But being able to go out and identify talent outside of your area, at least initially, is going to be super important. That's why I think it's big that they go in and they get a guy like Kane Archer, who had the chance to stay home. This is not an Arkansas kid that nobody wanted. He had big-time offers on his offer list. A lot of SEC schools wanted him. His home state of Arkansas, his home state school of Arkansas wanted him. He could have gone a lot of places. He's choosing Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton. For me, Andrew, it's about recruiting. It's about development. It's about integrity. And unfortunately, it's going to be about money. Eventually, UCF is going to have to catch up on the money front. Now, important, if you're Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton, and you can show that you know how to be a good steward over what you have, I think we might see the money people start to invest a little bit more in a program if they can prove that it's headed the right direction.
Well, retaining talent is definitely a challenge. Let's look at Ohio State. Ohio State won the CFP championship this past year. Their team people thought, oh, they had a $20 million roster. Almost all of that was retaining the talent that they had. They, outside of Caleb Downs, they largely didn't go outside the family all that much. So this goes back to, recruit a strong freshman class and cultivate it. At least in the freshman level, you can find exactly what you're looking for, the exact type of player, the exact type of personality. In the portal, it's a little more of a gamble. You got what you got, and it's what's available. So if they can get the right players, put them in the right place, then work on trying to retain those guys as they get a little bit older. I think winning begets winning. You have to game plan properly. You have to execute on the field. And there's we know there's the understanding, and Scott Frost has said it, more than once, that don't expect undefeated, out of the gate.
Fair.
They're using the talent that they have, and they know that what they have is not exactly what they're looking for. They're working with what they got. And it's going to take a little bit of time to use the freshman recruiting to be able to get the type of player they want. Kane Archer is the type of player that they want. It's the type of quarterback they're looking for. But a guy like Archer doesn't grow on a tree, and there's not multiple of him in the portal that they can easily nab. So, it takes a little bit of time. There's an understanding there, but you have to cultivate that. And if you can squeeze out wins with the talent that you have, and that comes with good game planning and execution, others will notice it. Winning begets winning. Iron shapes iron. No one wants to be with a loser. So if you could squeeze out wins, get to a bowl game in year one, get 8-4, 9-3 in year two, challenge for a conference championship and a CFP slot in year three. I mean, you're on an outstanding upward trajectory, and players are going to want to be involved. And as long as Scott Frost stays at UCF, and I think he will, because he made this mistake once before. He left before he was really ready. He knew he was leaving before he was ready. But there was a lot of other outside forces, his father's health and all that stuff about going with Nebraska. Florida tried to hire him, and he ultimately turned it down. I don't think he's going to make that mistake again, because he already learned that the grass is not always greener. So he's going to focus on cultivating stability at UCF. And that's hard for a non-blue blood program, to cultivate that consistency. Some schools like Iowa State with Matt Campbell, you just find the right guy that's going to stick around, that isn't interested in going for bigger bucks somewhere else. That's what the hope is with Scott Frost coming to back to UCF. Is he's here, he's not going anywhere, he's not interested in just the next job up. He already made that mistake. So players, I think, would be a little more comfortable coming to a program that is expected to have consistency at the top. Because, coach instability is a problem. And, if you don't have, that's why, coaches on expiring contracts don't recruit very well. We saw a lot of fluctuations with the recruiting class as the Gus Malzahn era started falling apart last year, and we started seeing cracks in the recruiting trail. It was one thing after another. So I think that's where it really comes with building winners, aside from knowing who you want and who you want to be as a program, is the safety of the security that your staff is going to be there. Mackenzie Milton is a UCF product. He's at his school. I have a feeling he will eventually move up to offensive coordinator at some point in his tenure at UCF. That's my guess. But he's currently, learning the ropes. This is the perfect opportunity. He was kind of stuck as an analyst at Tennessee. He really couldn't go any further. But he's learning the ropes. He's a guy who's at his alma mater, is in a very prime, place for success, and can utilize the fact he's at his alma mater to parlay that into recruiting successes. And I think we've already seen that with Kane Archer.
Yeah, look, You said something I thought was important there about Mackenzie Milton, and there's so many things that make him so important. But moving up to offensive coordinator at some point, I think that they're going to find upward mobility for Mackenzie Milton, because here's what's going to happen. After he starts developing guys, programs are going to come knocking. Right. And if you're Scott Frost, you got to keep yourself from being a pipeline for all your coaches just immediately jumping to bigger programs for better opportunities. So, along with the dollars that they're going to have to find for NIL, he may have to find some dollars for staff retention as well, too. Again, you want to build a winner, you need continuity of staff, you need continuity of players, and you need money. And that is today's college football. Look, I think they can do it, Andrew. I think they're in a good position to do it. Kane Archer's commitment, we may look back on this in years and say this was the start of something really, really good about, down in Orlando when they decided to go back and rehire Scott Frost to come back in and take over this program. They're going to continue to track this story. Can't wait to have Kane sit down with us again. I can't stress enough. It was a blessing to be able to sit down with that young man. Always a blessing to be able to sit down with you, my friend. Before we get out of here, as always, tell people where they can find you.
Well, you can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew, and you can catch my work on The Last Word on College Football, a part of The Last Word on Sports Family.
That's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.